This is Robert Clinkenbeard and David Anderson with the Commercial Landscapers Podcast. We're going to take 20 minutes of your life to deliver some amazing business content from accomplished leaders to bring you value, scale your business, and better yourself personally. We hope you really enjoy the show, and I encourage you to share with your network so they can subscribe and we can expand these messages globally. We are also super excited to be supported by two brilliant sponsors. If you're tired of measuring properties, Site Recon platform fully automates measurements so you can focus on sales. So think measurements, think Site Recon. The other sponsor is Company Cam, who make it dead simple to communicate, document, and problem solve with guys in the field, no matter where you are. Company Cam brings documentation, communication, and liability protection together in one simple, easy to use app for you and your entire team. Company Cam is the only app every landscaper needs. Check it out. Hi, this is Robert Clinkenbeard with the Commercial Landscapers Podcast. I am stoked today to be joined by Chris Cloud. Chris Cloud is not only a successful businessman, good friend who I've seen through the F3 athletes, but also a very accomplished long distance runner. I try and keep up with him, but he always kicks my ass. So Chris, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Robert. Great to be here. I'm excited.
So Chris, tell our audience a little bit about your background, just so that people get to know who you are.
Yeah, well, I was born in Nepal, and so as a kind of, I guess mountains are in my blood somehow.
Like a mountain goat.
Kind of that's right, a little bit. And so, kind of grew up there between there and Washington State on an island. So I've been around a lot of mountains. I love mountains, and maybe that's part of why I'm enjoy trail running in the mountains as well. I am a business consultant, really help companies and conscientious founders to scale up in ways that don't lose the magic of who they were when they were small. I think that's a big thing that happens. And really that's kind of part of my journey is, like everybody that doesn't know what they want to do, they go to business school. And so in business school, I started working for a company that was a startup and growing very fast. And in fact, I was one of the early employees, got to grow with the company over the years. And really working with the founders every day, working with leadership team, got to see all the phases of both the successes and joys of growth, but also, the downside of the growing pains as we as we hear them called. And so through that, really started on a journey of understanding sales and business growth in ways that I really believe in ways that are helping the team, helping the customers to flourish more, and allowing the leadership team to flourish as well. And so I'm very passionate about growth that doesn't hurt, growth that benefits founders and customers and employees as well. So that's a little bit of my background.
No, that's awesome. And I know you've been doing different things, but you've slightly pivoted or moved towards more of the sales function. And
that's right.
So I know you've been into a bunch of companies. I mean, what are some of the challenges that you typically see when you start working with a company around the sales part? Because that also ties into scaling up and growth of a company. I mean, that's a key thing.
For sure. And that definitely has been a more and more focus, and is really my main focus right now is the sales aspect of that. And that just entails so many different things. When people think of sales, I don't know, so many things come to mind. Some of it is multi-level marketing, and some of it is used car salespeople, and others have a great view of sales. So it kind of runs the gamut, I find. But, for me, starting out my career, people said, you can talk to people, you can do sales. So I found myself in sales roles early on. And when I worked with the startup that I mentioned earlier, I did really well in sales, was one of the top performing inside sales reps there. And I thought I really understood sales. And then I, kind of went and worked with a startup after that, just a very early stage startup that hadn't found product market fit. And in that pure sales role, found out you know what, I don't know as much as I thought I did. And it's one thing when the process has been designed for you and there's a playbook. It's one thing when there's a blueprint for how to succeed, right? You're standing on the tall shoulders of someone else who's figured that out. And it's another thing entirely when you're trying to figure that out from scratch. And so through that, a lot of failure. And then it wasn't until I hired I was in a role where I had a sales coach. And that completely changed the paradigm for me. He taught me so many of the things that I've continued to carry with me throughout these years, and really getting out of my own way and being able to move forward without without what he would call head trash, and
Right.
and being able to have a process. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk with you. I think you invited me on to talk about some of the challenges and some of the mistakes that they're very common and that are really costing both small businesses and salespeople a lot of money.
No, that's so true, because same thing. I go into a lot of companies, and when you start to, peel back the layers, a couple of things that stand out for me is that very few of them have a playbook. They just they've gone through the same thing they've done for, 5, 10, 15 years. But it's obviously, I think a lot of things have changed since then, especially the last year with with COVID. And
Big
then
time.
the other thing I've discovered is that when people say, "Oh, I've got some really good salespeople on my team," but when you actually start to ask them more questions, what you really figure out quickly is they're not true salespeople; they're more order takers, and
That's
totally
right.
different, totally different DNA there. So yeah, I'd love to hear about just some of the mistakes you see companies making out there, and some of the things that you're starting to figure out and address.
Yeah, and when as I started thinking about this, I came up with a list of 42.
Wow,
And
that doesn't surprise me.
these are all mistakes I've made, so I can speak from experience, and or seen over and over with my clients. I've worked with over 100 companies of all sizes, and these are just so common that you start to really pick them up, and anybody would if they were seeing it that often. And so why don't I start going through them? We'll see how far we can get. How does that
Yeah. Okay.
sound?
Yeah. Perfect. Let's go for it.
The first one is sounds simple, but it was a big deal for me, and it has been for my clients as well. And that is just simply not being okay with failure.
Okay.
Right. And so what that does, and what that did for me, is it paralyzed me and thought that I had to have all the answers, and I had to not make any mistakes, and that I had to say yes to everything the client asked me to do, and that I couldn't try things and have that. So what I call, it's kind of like a good scientist, right? A good scientist is running experiments. So, when the Wright brothers, they weren't scientists, but they were kind of approaching like scientists, right? When the Wright brothers were trying to figure out how to fly an airplane, let's say the first time they tried to fly one and it didn't work. Obviously, it took them hundreds and hundreds of tries.
Right.
And the first time they said, "Well, we're just dummies," or we can't do this. We failed. And they kind of closed up shop and went home. They would have never figured out how to fly. And I think that having that experimenter's mindset is what enables us to grow and actually improve, and being okay with failure. My coach taught me that the second best word to hear is no.
Okay.
Right.
I like that.
My second most favorite word is no, because, well, I love to hear yes. That means they're going to buy. But if they're not going to say yes, I love to hear no, because then I can move forward. I can move to the next one. And that's not really a failure. Many people see that as failure, but and I really try to teach salespeople to see that as part of the process.
Right. Yep. That makes sense. Yep. I can totally understand that. And what's your next mistake you see?
Yeah. So the next one is this one is hard for founders to understand, but I see it over and over. And we call it industry sameness in my business, but it's really, you're the same as all the competitors out there, at least in the ways that matter most to the customers, right? So every founder thinks they're very unique. Every business owner thinks they're different than everybody, and it's to be expected, right? Because you're in your own business and it feels different. But from reality, from the customer's perspective, in the ways that are most meaningful, most business, especially home service businesses, but just about any industry, and I've worked in dozens of industries, just about any industry, it's not a recipe for success to just copy the competition.
Okay.
A good example of this is I was shopping for landscaping services a few years ago in my house. For my house, we wanted to upgrade our yard, and we just wanted to be able to use it more, and weren't satisfied at all. And we'd got about 5 local landscapers come by and look at our property. And some of them had been recommended by friends, and some of them just found online. And essentially, they all did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I can see that.
You call them. They schedule an appointment to come out and look at your place.
Yeah.
They send a guy with sunglasses on in a pickup truck, right? And
Yep.
he comes out and walks your property, asks you a few questions. Did I lose you there?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And asks you a few questions, and then says, "Great, here's kind of what we're going to do, and I'm going to send you a proposal tomorrow, or next week. Depending on how fast they are." And then you say, "Great, thank you." And then they leave. They send you a proposal tomorrow or next week, and then they might call once to follow up. They usually don't call. They might email once to check up, see if you got the proposal, and then that's it. You never hear from them again.
Yeah,
and
I can totally relate to that.
I guarantee you, in fact, I've asked some of them, guarantee you if you asked them, they would say we're very different than the competitors, right? They're not, and not in ways that matter to us, not in ways that matter to the customer, which is one of the other mistakes. I'll get to that in just a minute. Anything to add there from your experience, Robert? I knew you were looking.
No, I mean, that's so true. But, and then when you ask them, what do they mean by, they're different, they might say, well, we're better quality, we're responsive, but it usually takes the client to prompt them to ask that. They're not necessarily forward in seeing that, selling themselves per se.
Right. And the trouble is everybody says that. So even
Yeah.
if you ask, that's not a differentiator that really is meaningful. You're not going to get ahead. And Airbnb founders have made a lot of headway recently in the news, as they've gone public. But Airbnb founders did not innovate hotels by looking at the hotel industry. Right? Yeah. They innovated hotels by looking outside the hotel industry.
Yeah,
right?
almost
You
like
can't
a fresh sheet of paper.
That's right. You're never, you're just looking at the competition is, and that's why I really encourage my clients, and that's why a lot of them hire me, is to look outside the industry,
right,
that you're in, and try to fill a niche that other people aren't filling, rather than looking at all the niches that are already filled and then trying to just be one more drop in that bucket.
Yeah. But I think the challenge is that a lot of the owners or founders don't know what they don't know.
That's right. That's right.
So how do you overcome that hurdle?
Yeah, I think you've got to, like I said, I think you've got to be curious. If you're just looking at your industry in order to develop your process, inevitably, and this is a quote by David Cooperrider that I love, is we live in a world created by the questions that we ask.
I like it.
Right. And so the questions that we ask are kind of the direction that we're looking. Mm-hmm. If we're on, I drive where I'm looking, right? Yeah. Especially early on when I was learning how to drive. So if you're just looking at the competition primarily every day, and that's all of course, it's the only thing you're going to know to repeat, right? Inevitably, you're going to copy some version of the competition. But right. The rule that I love is fill the void they're not filling, right? Don't look, act, feel, or taste like the competition. Like if they're doing it, that's probably a good indicator that you shouldn't do it to a certain extent. And so I would say, look to other industries for inspiration. Be curious about the broader world. In a sense, when we look to our own industry, we're putting ourselves in a box, and it's astonishing how often you put in a box. You're like, oh, I don't have to do that. We think it's the way we've always done it, but then you realize, oh, well, that process of the call and the appointment and the proposal and the follow-up email, that's not the only way to design a process, right? What if the guy had said, what if one of them had said, you know what, we want to respect your time. In fact, instead of waiting until next week for us to come out, I'm going to do a little Zoom chat with you right now. You can show me your property. I'll give you a pretty good idea of whether or not we're a good fit for you. And if we are, I'll tell you the plan that we would put you on to succeed. And they would ask some questions and they would go through and they would qualify us, right? This is another mistake people make, is they don't qualify. They think everybody's a prospect. Everybody's not a prospect, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And so then they could have, let's say, I'm going to shoot from the hip here, right? But they could have said, you know what? Okay, let's say budget's an issue for somebody. We've got this plan where you can do three payments of, you know, $2,000 each. You'll get your yard to a condition that you're going to like. It's not going to be the full version, but over the first year, we're just going to kind of work on that baseline, get your yard to a really good place, overhaul the grass, put in new topsoil, plant some new shrubs. That'll be phase one. Since you don't have the budget to do everything today, phase two is going to be year two, and we're going to put you on a plan for that, right? And they kind of had set you up. Well, that would have been a big differentiator for us. Now, again, I'm shooting from the hip because there's probably tons of other things that they could have done. And that gets me to some of the other things that I've written down here, which is number 3 is customers. Okay, so this is the mistake salespeople and founders make often, is they make the mistake of thinking that their customers are actually buying what they're selling.
Okay, explain more.
All right, so the best example of this is Clayton Christensen, the famous strategist and Harvard business professor, passed away, I believe it was last year. He wrote a lot about innovation and thinking outside the box. McDonald's hired him to come in and do a study. Well, you know why? They weren't selling enough milkshakes. So they said, we want to figure out how we can sell more milkshakes. They had done these big advertising campaigns and people just weren't buying more milkshakes and they couldn't figure out why. So they hired Clayton Christensen, paid him a bunch of money, him and his consulting group, to come in and study why people weren't buying more milkshakes. Interesting problem to have, right? Yeah. So they said, so he started studying. You know how he did it? You know how he started studying the problem? He stood in McDonald's and watched people all day long.
That makes sense.
That's where he started. So he started watching people and he noticed a very, very curious thing after a few days of watching people. And he watched the drive-through and he watched the store. He noticed that people were coming through the drive-through in the morning and they were ordering milkshakes. Okay. In the morning, early in the morning, like 6 or 7. Right. Yeah, that's a kind of a curious thing. I don't know why. And he noticed this day in, day out throughout the week during weekdays. And he said, well, I better talk to the customers. So he got to the customers, several of the customers together after they ordered a milkshake. He said, well, just out of curiosity, why'd you order a milkshake? And they started telling him things like, well, I could have, I have a commute every morning and I have about a 30-45 minute drive. And on the drive, I kind of need something something to do. I'm kind of bored and I'm driving along, listening to the radio, and I could buy a bagel in the morning, but I eat that so fast, it's just gone. And then it's all carby. And then I feel kind of get that mid-morning, tiredness if I do that. I could buy a banana, but that goes so fast too. But if I buy the milkshake, the thickness is just perfect for it lasts me that 30 minutes on my drive. And it fills up, it gives me something to fill up my stomach so I don't get the rumbles about 10:30 when I'm in that important meeting. And so what he figured out was they were hiring the milkshake to do a job. And that job was a very specific job, right? That job was fill my stomach and keep me occupied during my commute. Well, so he developed this whole framework, as as academics are want to do, he calls it the jobs to be done theory. And the jobs to be done theory is that whole idea that customers are rarely hiring your thing, service, or product to do what you think it is. They're probably hiring it to do something else, and it's a job. And so for landscaping, it might, for us, it was probably, we were hiring a beautiful lawn that our kids could play in, because it was full of weeds, and we really weren't very proud of it. And and so we were hiring a place that we could enjoy, that could be a part of our inheritance, and part of the way that we brought our kids up. And for other people, it may be something different, but that job is rarely what you think you're selling. And so instead of selling the mechanics of hey, we're going to come out here and bulldoze this. It's going to take us a day and all this. People don't care about that. You're really selling the dream of life after what you're doing. And that's a big mistake that salespeople make.
Well, especially if it goes back to the point you made earlier, if they're not asking enough questions and really diving deeper, because I think a lot of people, they'll ask questions, but they're already thinking about, they're already in that sell mode. They're almost
That's right.
thinking about what they're going to say without actually listening to what the client or customers are wanting.
That's exactly right. And I think it's a curse of knowledge in a sense, right? The more prospects you talk to and the more you understand about your product, the less you think you need to listen. But I think you're exactly right. The opposite is actually true. The more you need to intentionally listen, because sometimes you hear what you think you're going to hear,
right,
versus what's actually happening. And there's a word for that. Daniel Pink calls that attunement, where you're truly attuning yourself to the buyer. And what happens in attunement is you become in sync with that person, almost to the point where you're seeing the world through their perspective. And this is what really great salespeople do, is they're able to put themselves in the shoe of the buyer, and it's really all about them.
That makes sense. So let's do one more mistake that salespeople make, and then we'll start to wrap things up here.
All right. Well, let's see, which one should we choose? Okay. There are so many more, but here's one that I like that's kind of fun. Is they're really well. Okay, let's do one a little more practical. One of the things that salespeople hear over and over is you have to close the business, right? Close it, close. We need closers. Always be closing. ABC. Close. And you hear this from your sales manager, and you see this in movies about sales, and it's kind of a funny trope. Well, that's true. We need to close business, right? That's why we're paid as salespeople. That's what we're paid to do, and it's very important. And I used to think that closing was about maybe some tricks or some wording that you did, to get them to sign the paper. And really, it's much less about that. And what I've discovered is, and this is a principle, is you have to call people to make a decision in order to close business, right? But what is a close? Well, it's a decision to do something or not do something. And even if the decision is not to do anything, that's still a decision, right? A decision not to make a decision is a decision.
Right.
So what I learned, what really helped me was when I stopped trying to close people and I started helping to lead them to clarity. Right. That. So it's not about closing people. That's very inhumane. It sounds like a terrible thing, right? Nobody wants to be closed. Robert, do you want to be closed?
No. I didn't sort of almost forced into it.
Yeah, but however, people do want clarity, and they do want a solution to that job that they're hiring or that problem that they have, right? And so if you can give them clarity and lead them through a path and not pressure them, right? And it's not about pressure. It's not about arm wrestling. It's not about a battle with your prospects, right? It's about leading them, helping them lead. And that means you have to build trust, right? If you're going to lead somebody, they have to trust you. They have to trust that you're going to do what's in their best interest. And so there's a whole process around that I have. But really, the day I became a better closer was the day I became a decision maker in my own life.
Okay.
And oftentimes I had been an indecisive person. And so that indecisiveness made it difficult for me to call other people to be decisive.
Right.
Right.
That makes sense.
And so I kind of had to walk that walk in a sense. And it turns out not everybody's born knowing how to be a good decision maker.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, you don't need it in your title. Everybody's a decision maker about their own life.
Yeah.
Right? You don't need the word decision. You don't need the executive title, CEO or vice president, to be a decision maker. Everybody's a decision maker. When I start working with salespeople about the fact that they are a decision maker, they're empowered to make decisions. And in fact, in that relationship with the buyer, the salesperson is empowered when I want to tell them, they can tell the prospect no. Right? You can back away if you don't feel like they're a good fit for you.
Yeah, that's true.
You are empowered to make that decision, and that's very freeing as a salesperson. And so, of course, there's genteel and kind ways to do that without being a jerk, and that's important. But but very important. So it turns out nobody really teaches you how to be a decision maker in life. Oftentimes, some of us weren't raised, by parents who taught us how to make good decisions, and so it wasn't until I intentionally started practicing being a decision maker in my day-to-day life that I was able then to really help people become decision makers in the process of buying. And that was so helpful, and something that's what I find a lot of salespeople just don't understand and don't practice. And then they have a hard time asking other people to make decisions. And so that's a really important thing.
Right, cool. So as we wrap things up here, I know you've started moving towards offering sales training classes. So why don't you give our listeners just a quick update on that, and how can people get hold of you if they want to just find out more about doing some sales training?
Yeah, well, I'm launching an online intensive, it's going to be a 12-week intensive. By the time this airs, it'll probably be ready to roll. And so you can find out about that on CreativeSalesMM.com, my website, CreativeSalesMM.com. You can also find articles on there about some of the things we're talking about here today, resources. You can sign up for my newsletter to learn more. And I'm also offering a free sales webinar where I'm training on some of these, practically how to implement some of these principles that I've talked about today. And so that'll be on there. You can sign up for one of those webinars.
Cool. Well, thank you, Chris. I really enjoyed that today. I think it was a good discussion. Sorry we didn't get through all 10 items, but maybe we'll get you back on in a couple of months and we'll try and get through more of them. So that's been it.
I talked to way too much, which is another mistake that salespeople make.
All good information, though. I mean, all stuff I hear all the time going into companies. So all very relevant stuff. So I think the audience will get a good idea of all the different challenges that we both uncover. So thank you, Chris, for your time today. Really appreciate it. And I look forward to talking to you soon, Chris.
Yeah, really enjoyed it, Robert. Love what you're doing, and we really enjoyed our time together.
Okay,
looking forward to next time.
Cool.
See ya.
Awesome, Chris. Thank you, Chris. Hopefully that was pure dead brilliant for you today, and we've got some great takeaways for your business and your personal life. This is Robert Clinkenbeard along with David Anderson, and would love to get you and your friends to join us on our journey. 2 quick things before you go, listeners. Check out our website, thecommerciallandscaper.com. You can subscribe, you can share with your friends, but more importantly, check out our sponsors. We have Site Recon, who are going to help to capture measurements on your property and create a really streamlined process. And we have Company Cam, who make it dead simple to communicate, document, and problem solve with guys in the field, no matter where you are. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.